Wow. Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to this afternoon session today. And today in the afternoon, of course, we have got some fantastic discussion that's going to come up, really. And I don't want to take much time. But of course, in Manavutsa, what we are trying to do is to talk to the many people and businesses as we can, and also charities and community organizations who are actually working in developing and building Leicester. So I will welcome now. So I have got Rehana with me, but I'll leave that introduction that Kamla is going to do. And Kamla, those of you have already seen her in different events. Kamla Patni is the founder, director of Celebrate Our Similarities, and they focus particularly on areas of mental health and climate change. So a very warm welcome and welcome to the studio this afternoon as well. It's going to be a fantastic one. I can see that both of you have got so much to say. And I think as university, we are also trying to kind of understand how we can do more and connect more and work more together. So over to you, Kamla.
Hi, thank you ever so much for inviting us on to this amazing Manavotsav, which is really taking off. I think this is the third year that we've collaborated with the DMU on this now. So we're very proud to be doing that. And I know we're a little bit late in starting, so I won't bore you with what causes, because I think I've explained that too many times and people will get bored. But we have a wonderful conversation today with Rehana Sidat. Rehana is a founder, director, and mental health advocate. So, if I read her bio before I introduce her, Rehana is a qualified and experienced manager, educator, and health and well-being professional. She has more than 25 years of experience working with minority communities and vulnerable groups. She's a co-founder of ANSA, a charity for adults with learning disabilities and family carers. Rihanna set up Jamila's legacy as a result of her experience of working with ethnic minority communities and vulnerable groups such as disabled people, family carers, looked after children, families affected by abuse, and older people often experiencing mental health problems. In 2019, Rihanna returned to study to enhance her knowledge to support her work with Jamila's legacy and recently graduated from the University of Derby with a BSc Honours in Cognitive Behavioral Therapeutic Approaches. Congratulations. Rihanna has currently, she also teaches adults and manages an after school care service on top of all of this. She's married, has 4 children, and 2 granddaughters as well. Amazing. I don't know where you get all the time. But hello, Rihanna. Lovely
Hi,
to have you on board.
how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you with all your list of things that you're doing? I don't know where you have the time to even join us today.
Bless
Well,
you. I think when you're passionate about things, and I think Kamla, you can relate because we have met before, you just do find the time. You know, when something matters to you, you find the time.
absolutely. That's I think the conversation is going to be around that today. So thank you for joining us. I mean, I'll kick it off if you want, but I'm sure Indrani will have a lot more in-depth conversations to ask you about as well. So just give us a little bit of your history and your passion. You know what your current passions are. I know you've got loads.
Yes. Well, I think for me, from a very young age, I found that I'm just one of these kind of people that likes to listen to other people and to help, you know, if you can make a difference. And I found I was good at it. So I've just kind of continued it. So a lot of my work as an adult, my charitable work has been around working with people who perhaps don't get the help they need, often are quite isolated, or find it really difficult to open up and talk. And because I am such an approachable person, it's something I've just taken on. So whether that be when my children were growing up and I was volunteering in the clubs that they were involved with, or I set up my own clubs because there was a need, or whether that was volunteering in the schools, and it's just continued. So I've for several years I was a foster carer. until I had to basically stop foster caring because of the responsibilities I had in my personal life. I had to give that up. But yeah, I've done a lot of work around working with people with learning disabilities, especially we talk about South Asian communities. It's such a taboo around learning disabilities and disability in general. You know, often, you know, even simple things that you and I take for granted, like going to a wedding, you know, for them and their family carers would be a huge issue. That's why I set up Ansar. And then I found so many people struggling with their mental health, whether that's because of their caring role or because disabled people are often people who are more likely to be discriminated, excluded, less likely to be able to make friends and form relationships. And then when we're talking about invisible disabilities, like people on the autism spectrum or people with learning disabilities, you know, there are the added challenges. So I started finding that a lot of people were struggling with their mental health. We don't have the education, and this is still going on. We don't have the knowledge that we need. We often know a little bit about our physical health and we know how to take care of it, but there's never been the emphasis on our mental health. Yes, the mind and taking care of the mind. We don't even have the language in a lot of our South Asian languages. We don't even have the words to describe, you know, mental well-being and our mental health. You know, things like depression. So it's really difficult. So I think in about 2015, you know, I set up Jiminy's Legacy because of the fact that there is such a lack of mental health awareness in the community. So first of all, having that education, and then the stigma and the taboo and the shame around mental health, and if people are struggling, how much more difficult it makes it for people to open up and say, we're struggling. Never mind the next stage, which is getting help and where to get help. And do we trust the services that are out there because of people's experiences? So Kamla, I could go on and on and on, but I'm going to stop there. But that's pretty much how I've got to where I am now.
It's so true, though. I mean, I think that the community, in a way, has let itself down by not engaging with the service providers. I mean, I think we had this conversation with the police commissioner, the previous police commissioner, and sadly, Simon Cole as well, about the services in general. You know, our communities tended to be very insular. We deal with things within our communities. And so we never actually engaged with the service providers to shape the services according to our cultural needs. And in the process, we lost out quite a lot. And then over the years, the services have moved on, but our experiences in you know, the way young people are living, the pressures of life, you know, working, and all the other things that the modern life requires of you, we have not kept up with, and as a result, we're now having to find ways of filling those gaps, which is what you're talking about, because you found a gap in service, you started to set things up, which is so much harder to do. But I take my hat off to you for doing so many things like that. But we do need to change the system, I think.
I think, Kamla, in many ways, though, it's not necessarily that people are not accessing the services. It's because services are either not meeting their needs, because this is an issue as well, or they're not aware of them. I mean, I hate this word, this term, hard to reach. I don't believe anybody is hard to reach. It is our approach. It is about building trust. And if you are a service provider, you know, whether that be, you know, the public sector, private sector, or the voluntary sector, it's how do you engage with people? Because how did we meet, for example? You know, it is our approaches, and it's the way we build trust and we meet needs. So unless I'm not going to go into a shop that doesn't cater for my needs. So it's the same method, same approach. There, it's not, you know, it's been tried and tested. The answers are there. So when people say, oh no, these people are not willing and these people are not engaging, or, you know, these people are hard to reach, this community is so hard to reach, I don't think it is. You know, I think it's our efforts, because if you really are determined, anything is possible. You know, we're talking about, I mean, for me, my parents migrated in the 60s to England from India, from the Gujarat area. from the Baruch side, and mum had English. She'd had an education. She'd been to university, but dad hadn't had the same education. But they managed to communicate and get on and build a life. And my dad started a business, so he developed his skills. So I think it is, you know, and even when language was a barrier, they were still able to, you know, communicate. And that's how we've all got by. We go on holiday. You know, if I go to Spain, I can't speak Spanish. I can speak the odd word, but we get by. I can order a meal. I can have a conversation still with somebody with the gestures and with, you know, a few words that we have in common or things that we have in common. So I think that the solutions are very simple. It's just the willingness to try and people caring.
This is a wonderful comment, really. I mean, actually, this morning I had I was meeting a student, and we were. I mean, she's a PhD researcher in the university, and we were in a supervision meeting this morning, and she was saying, "Oh well, you know, I'm kind of struggling with such and such thing," and I said, "Well, have you gone to the Leicester City Council website?" And said, "No." Do they do something? I said, "Yeah, they do." And you know, it's more about you going into that website, registering. The point that, you know, what Rehana was saying just now is the point that, you know, are you actually taking things to the community? Are you willing to share what you have with all the communities? And whether, if somebody doesn't know, are you willing to actually give a hand and say, well, you see what, you can go there, you can go here, you know? So that kind of signposting. So it's a very powerful thing that you said, that, you know, it's not about we the language barrier, that because you speak a different language, therefore you don't understand, because you don't understand English, therefore you don't have access. So that's very much about, it's a kind of a dialogue which is more kind of a having a conversation in a more kind of a colonial society. So here at DMU, we are starting this conversation called Decolonizing DMU. And I think that this is the kind of thing that we would like to see, that, you know, language is created by humans. And, you know, you need to know, like you say, that you can travel the world without talking a word. You know, it's the gestures. You've got many more things, you know. We are all very blessed about like how we can communicate differently, different ways. So that's very powerful. And I'm just thinking that, you know, when you are talking about this, your initiative, and, you know, how you're reaching out to the community, is it more multifaceted? So are you actually looking for different avenues of communication,
Absolutely.
rather than just thinking, oh, people will come and see me on Facebook, or yeah.
And I think for us to be inclusive, it's about considering all different ways. And I think for maybe my background and my training around, you know, being inclusive and equality and diversity has always made me consider that person-centered approach. So what works for one person will not work for another. Some people read, some people write, some people don't do either. Some people can't hear. So if we're inclusive, so somebody who can't hear, we put subtitles on this video, we just included a community that may not necessarily be able to, you know, watch or listen to this by having subtitles. So I think there's so much we can consider, and we can't meet all needs, but it's the intent. I believe it's about being, you know, sincere, and as long as the intentions are about being inclusive, and then if we get it wrong, it's about saying, apologizing and saying, I'm sorry, we got that wrong. What can we do to make that better? Or work with communities like ours, like Kamla's organization, and right? Or there's so many out there, and it is that partnership and that collaboration of how we can do this together. But to then just dismiss and say, oh, these people don't engage, I don't agree with that. You know, there's so many new things that we come across. It's like this festival, I didn't know about it. I've only, you know, and you've been going 3 years, and it's fantastic to hear about it, but I've only known about it a few months, you know.
That's right.
So I mean, it's about growing that community and making more and more people aware. But that's the work that we all have to do. It isn't the individual struggling. So if I take it back, to bring it to the present, Kamla, and the fact that Joanna's legacy exists to increase that mental health awareness and to deepen that understanding, and to equip as many people as possible, is if we're talking about groups of people who are struggling with their mental health, people with severe mental illness, people with mental health problems, for them, navigating through these services is not easy. When you're extremely vulnerable and you're not in a good state, you're not going to reach out for services just like that. You're not going to know where to go. That's why having, organizations like ourselves that bridge that gap is really important. To signpost, to recommend, because if they say, oh, Kamala recommended that organization, they're going to trust your advice because they know you, they don't know that service, So it's really important, those recommendations as well.
And I think it's so important now, particularly since COVID, that we all work together.
Yeah.
What's happened in the past, I believe, and I'm getting more and more convinced of this idea as I see so many situations, is that, funding has always been given to, there was a conversation we had just a little while ago with Yasin, and, the funding is made available to stronger organizations or the known entities by the funding agencies. And more often than not, it's those that are well established, but they're only well established because they were recognized in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
To establish yourself and then get the recognition takes a lot of effort. And unfortunately, those, like ourselves, when we set up something, it's through passion and wanting to bridge a gap in services or whatever. We have to make so much effort to get to the point where you manage to get funding. But it's usually because those organizations don't have a history with you, they're not willing to do anything more than a pilot. And then you work so hard to make it a success. And by the time you've made it a success and you go back to them for further funding, which others don't have to because they get longer term funding. But when you do go back to them, the individual that supported you has left and gone on to something else, or their priorities as an organization have moved. And so they won't be able to support this small pilot project anymore. And we're back to square one. And that we need to change. We need to get into the mainstream of funding. And in a way, the history of that, I think, sometimes is that because the funding hasn't been forthcoming for our groups, we've tended to be in the classic historical point that about, South Africa, for example, when they say, the divide and rule, which is, historically that's been around. Well, that's what happened with our organizations. We don't trust each other, or we don't share freely our ability to help each other. I don't think, and I think that needs to change now, particularly since COVID.
Yeah, so it's all this thing. You're right, actually. And I'm just thinking that, with all of those sort of pressures, negativity, and, kind of things that we have or generally encounter, what has been your inspiration to go along and do so many things? And,
I think just as many barriers that are out there, there are also as many opportunities. And it is how you create those opportunities yourself, if nobody's creating them for you, and finding a way out of them. I'm very much about focusing on solutions and finding alternatives. And that's how I've been able to achieve what I've been able to achieve. And where there's a need, if you're able to meet it, I think it's really important that you do. But yes, there's always this issue in terms of collaboration. I think there is a lot of collaboration going on. We mustn't forget that. We're collaborating right now. There's 3 different organizations collaborating. So there is a lot of good work, and we need to recognize it. In terms of funding, the challenges are always going to be there because number one, you've got the people who commission services, the people who make those decisions obviously are going to look at costs. And when you're not realistically costing a service, a project, whatever it is, and the funding opportunities out there, small organizations like us cannot realistically deliver on what they're asking. If you are an existing organization that already has resource and capacity, then you can bid for that funding, which may not have costed all of those other bits, and be able to deliver that service. And the thing you mentioned about pilot, I would say to you, is the piloting of services is great for trialing things out and proving there is a need. What really saddens me is when pilots prove how much of a demand there is, and then they're pulled away. There's nothing after that. So these people who have now started accessing this service and have been benefit from it, it's pulled out, and there's nothing to replace that. So as you say, we're back to square one again. So these are things
And
that really
that's
do frustrate me.
worse.
Yeah, this frustrates me, but I think there are ways around it. There's a lot more collaborative encouragement from funders and commissioners. So it's looking at those kind of opportunities. And there are always going to be people who feel threatened, organizations who feel threatened, because obviously if you're reliant on funding for everything you do, and we're not creative, then that's going to be an issue. So for me, I mean, you know, I can openly say this. I've been operating nearly 7 years. I have had no funding, but I've been extremely successful. So I know what I could do if I was given the funding. I could be much more consistent instead of just offering once a week, twice a week, when I know there's such a demand, and I can reach many more people. But that's the way forward. But I know that that's not something that you can just do on your own, and it all takes a lot of work. And currently, Kamala, we do this in our spare time. You know, we have other commitments. So yeah, I'm excited about the future. I know there's such a great need since the pandemic. The demand has increased. There are so many people who are really, really struggling, and not just people who already had existing mental health problems, people who have now got mental health problems as a result of what we've all just gone through and are still going through. And the issue of grief and loss is quite big in our community as well. A lot of us have lost loved ones during the pandemic, either because of the pandemic or as a result of health problems that were not detected or delayed in diagnosis, and we've lost them. We've been unable to grieve the way that we grieve. We come from communities where collective grief is so important. Community grief is so important. It's part of our process. To not be able to do that, especially with our, the elders in the community who maybe weren't using technology the way you and I use technology. They were further isolated. So it has been extremely difficult for people. And I think people grieving even now, you know, really are finding it hard to comprehend what has happened.
And I think that's really important. I think that you brought out that one, that topic of grief, and I'm thinking that, you know, in Leicester, of course, we had people during this time, during the pandemic, where people have been actually encountering certain situations, and they were losing their families, and, you know, particularly for the South Asian diasporic communities. So have you done, I mean, what, as Jamila's legacy, what have you done during that time, and how have you managed to actually sail through that difficult time?
So for me, it was then telephone support to the individuals that needed it. But again, I was still I worked throughout the pandemic as a key worker. So it was trying to balance out, you know, when I could provide that support. And I was studying at the same time as working. And then we went online. So we started using Zoom. So that was a good way of supporting people. So small groups that needed specific support. And then I brought in professionals to do different workshops. We partnered up with the Clinical Commissioning Group, and we did some work around vaccine awareness and COVID awareness as well, and addressing some of the propaganda and, you know, the kind of hysteria that was going on at the time. So we did some work around that. We had practitioners come in on Zoom and facilitate sessions to help people cope and look at coping strategies. People have developed social anxieties as well as a result. So we did a specific workshop on social anxiety as well. And for some people, there was more anxiety about being online. They didn't trust. So ensuring that they felt safe, the environment was safe. So that meant things like not recording for some of those sessions. So it was a safe space for them to share, hey, I'm struggling. If they didn't want their video on, we don't push anyone to have their video on. If they want to remain anonymous, I mean, it's all managed in a way that works for them, but works for us as well, because we need to keep the organization safe. But these are things to consider, you know, when we're trying to be inclusive.
I think that's yeah, you're right. I mean, I think that's the trust, and also we found something during this time is that there is a huge digital divide issue
Yeah.
in Leicester, you know,
Yeah.
and we have not actually looked at that. You know, maybe if the pandemic was not here, we would not have talked about it.
Yeah.
But I think the more and more we worked in that time, we've found that, you know, that there is a growing interest now within the communities to learn technology and
That's
to stay
right.
connected, and
Yes.
you know, all of that.
I did some research around that as well, looking at digital technology and older people, focusing on faith communities and also older people. So Leicester Aging Together was one of the organisations that I looked at, and also, you know, the Leicester Council of Faiths, looking at the demography there and who was using what and where were the barriers. And for some older people, WhatsApp is a very popular medium. So reaching people through those kind of groups. Some people were not comfortable with the video calls. That just was like, oh, no way. But then when we tried to educate them about FaceTime, their children were using FaceTime and they were able to see their grandchildren. That was something that started to feel appealing. So it's how we reach people and think, oh my God, how can this technology be of benefit to me in my everyday life? You know, so then we went from that to those collective, the coming together online for weddings, coming together for funerals, you know, having our bhajans together, our prayers together, you know, live streaming at the graveyard, all of those kind of things. And I think it's opened the door for a lot of people who would not have considered this technology.
That's interesting because that's something you experimented as well, Kamla, didn't you? With Faith
That's right.
Education, you formed a community of
Yeah.
similar interest, and now you're running that live, really.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, we're actually doing it in person at the moment at the DMU, but that's what we did. We started doing physical peace education sessions at a cafe in Evington just before the COVID hit. And then we learned, I mean, I'd never heard of Zoom until the COVID happened. And then suddenly we had to learn everything. And it was really well received. And in fact, I still receive comments. And then we created a WhatsApp group. So I am in that category. I love WhatsApp.
I think it's
And
easiness of using WhatsApp. You know, it's very much like user centric, and you know, it's not complicated at all.
no, that's why I like it.
Yeah.
But what we found is that those people that are on there are like friends, and they're from different parts of the country. You know,
Yeah.
so it just goes to show that once we've crossed that barrier of this anxiety of doing, um, you know, media and digital use, that we are actually, once we feel comfortable, it's a great platform for making friendships as well. But the other side I was thinking was that during that time, a lot of family were trying to contact their older people that were living on their own, or a couple of old people living together. Um, and they found it difficult. They just used the landline because that's what they were used to. But now young people it's becoming normal. That's a lot of your connection with family. Although you know you can have a view for or against this, but I think there is a stronger leaning towards contacting via, you know, media rather than face to face in person.
Yeah.
And it's also related to the fact that again, right now we've got COVID running quite heavily
Mm.
again, so people feel vulnerable going to their older people
Yeah.
or, you know, relatives.
Yeah.
So again, the need for this is still very strong, but we
I,
haven't actually addressed missed it.
No,
Lots of
absolutely. And I
so
think, Kamla, what's wonderful is that it's brought generations together. So young people teaching older people how to use technology. I think it's fantastic. It's another way of connecting. So, and that's been really good to see. And for young people to feel valued, grandchildren showing their grandparents how to use technology.
And that connection between them.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
joy.
I mean, during the pandemic, I was reading stories, during the lockdown, sorry, we're still in the pandemic, using FaceTime to read bedtime stories to my granddaughters, So, there's so many creative ways. And then my other daughter in London would call me and say, Mom, I'm cooking this. How do I do this? So it's amazing.
It's lovely.
There's so many benefits to it.
And it's very therapeutic as well, in your daily lives when you're doing something new, and I think that this pandemic, of course, I mean, there has been lots and lots of problems. At the same time, it has also asked us to look inside as a human being, and and we're trying to kind of be more generous, be more kind, and that kind of thing. Just I believe that maybe time and again we have actually experienced this kind of junctions, isn't it? When it comes back and saying,
right.
well, you're a human being. Don't look as whether you have got black hairs or brown hairs.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? Yeah, but doesn't it just prove that when you look at the NHS looking at social prescribing as the way forward, you look at how people have started to communicate and find kindness as a good way of living, and all of the things that you just mentioned. Doesn't it show that our default position as human beings is simple and kindness and getting on with people and
that's right.
Peace,
ultimately. From a place of peace and harmony, not only for those around us, but us, and for us to have that inner peace. It can only happen if there is peace around us, so it's really important.
Yeah, it's so true. And we do have to, I mean, again, this was a conversation that we just had with Yasin as well, that we need to just get together as people with like-minded passions who haven't had our voices heard as much as they should have, I guess, to a degree anyway, to actually join forces and actually bring that on the agenda. And I think Leicester's so uniquely positioned.
We are.
We have so much going for
if you just look at how we all banded together, how many people, people who weren't even part of organizations, they started, and I did the same, posting their telephone number through letterboxes in the neighborhood to say, look, we are here if you need us. We'll do your shopping for you, especially if you're vulnerable, you're shielding, etc. And I'm really proud to say that, we're part of Leicester, because if we look back, the amount of giving and kindness and compassion and humanity that was displayed during, some really, really difficult times has been amazing, and it's been so comforting. And I think it gives us all hope again, that
exactly,
and we need that.
I think like mutual aid, so we were working through this mutual aid thing, and it was maybe 3 days and it took off like very fast. People just kind of saying, oh, I've got a van, oh, I've got a car, oh, I've got this, that, people saying, oh, I've got some free time, I can call someone and talk. I think that's really what we need. So, I mean, going forward, from what we already have experienced to where we are now, what do you think Leicester needs more and more and more to be in a more better, stronger position?
I don't think there's one answer. And I think we really need to review our current situation, because at the moment, most of the services are firefighting. It's playing catch up. There's a lot going on. So what has just happened, that reflection up until now, it's not going to be thorough. We're not going to get a proper picture right now, because at the moment, whether I give you the example, whether there's waiting lists for surgery and they're playing catch up, whether it's to see a specific specialist, whether you're on a waiting list for mental health services, or whether it's the basic things that you haven't done for a long time and you're trying to play catch up as an individual. There is so much of that going on. This work that we need to reflect on what's going on, it will need a collective. Kamla, you'll have a piece of the jigsaw, I'll have a piece of the jigsaw. Everybody will have something. And then I think it's that coming together. Things like the census is going to give us some of the picture as well. I know obviously that wasn't looking at the pandemic. However, that will all come in play as well. And then other research out there, universities are very vital for that as well. And I think then we should position ourselves what the priority is, because for me to turn around and say to you, what is the priority? I don't think that would be really fair. Obviously, I'm going to say mental health. I think it's massive.
I don't think you're far off there, though, even if you were to
Yeah.
say that. Because
So, Kamla, for me, if we think about people's physical health has deteriorated because people are not as physically active because a lot of the time we're working from home, we're at desks, the way we're sitting now, a lot of the services people were accessing, the gyms were closed, all of that came in play. Not everybody was blessed with a garden or a green space. Yeah. People living in flats and didn't have anywhere to go. So people haven't been getting the exercises. And then you see the two are connected anyway. If your mental health deteriorates, you're more likely for your physical health to deteriorate. Physical health deteriorates, you're more likely to have a mental health problem. It's all connected. So if you develop a mental health problem, for example, like depression, it can demotivate you. You don't want to be active anymore. You don't want to do anything. And that can have an impact. You may overeat. That's just an example. That's not everybody. To comfort eat. And that could increase your weight. I'm just giving an example. It could go the other way. But all of these things.
That's so true, because it has, I can see that in myself, because, during that time, of course, I was working continuously from the desk, sitting down. So I've got no space of my own in the house anymore.
Oh, God.
So everybody's sharing the working space, so everybody working, and then you've got a child and family.
Yeah.
And so it was very much like, okay, I have to keep going. So I need a sugar rush. So have a chocolate,
Yes.
have something to
Yes.
munch on, some
Yes.
biscuits,
Yeah.
And I think that lots of people have actually said, and I've realized after that, and I'm saying, well, now I'm keeping empty jars, no biscuits at all. But, but that's the habit that you then go into, that then takes you a longer time to come out
That's
of
right.
it.
Definitely. And once you've developed those habits, it's very hard to unlearn these habits. And it's your go-to, isn't it? I feel rubbish. I need something sweet. Or let me just grab that sweet chocolate,
Absolutely.
But there are a lot of things, Kamla, but the health of Leicester's population is really important. And that is the physical and mental health. Obviously, I am going to say mental health, because for me, I think that I feel that we are in trouble. We need to prioritize this really big time. We do not have capacity or resources to support the amount of our people, especially young people who are struggling with their mental health. It is not acceptable that we have got children waiting a year for a school counsellor or 2 years on the CAMS services. So that's the children and adolescent mental health services. We think about teen years, where you're more likely to be affected, those crucial years of your education as well, and not getting the support you need. And then the risk to crime as well, etc., and their futures. I think it's just so important that investment is made, and I keep advocating for that. Whether I'm meeting MPs, whether I'm meeting officers, whether I'm posting on social media, although everybody's mental health is important, but the future generation, I think, is really important.
Absolutely.
I teach like the public relations as well. And one of the things that we have started doing really from 2020 is to link the UN Sustainable Development Goals to then look into the national situation or to look into the international situation. And I was surprised to see, half of it was on mental health. Half of it was on that.
SDGs,
yeah.
And I think it's just reminding people of that and bringing it back. And for us, Jamina's Legacy, our vision is that we normalize mental health conversations, just like we are having a conversation now. So it becomes part and parcel of our life. So when I said to you, Kamla, how are you? I mean it much deeper. I'm not just saying, how are you?
And you're not saying I'm fine.
I know.
That's the thing,
No,
isn't
I don't. I don't.
No, we had this conversation, isn't it? I think last year or so at some point. And then I saw that on Twitter as well. That's going round, that saying that, I'm not fine. And it's okay to say I'm not fine.
It's okay not to be okay.
Yes, it's okay not to be okay as well. So, all of these conversations needs to be much more normalized. Even if somebody is having a hard day, they will come up and smile and say, good morning, how are you? Oh, I'm fine, thank you. That's very robotic.
That's our go-to, isn't it? Because it's ingrained in us. And this is what I mean. If we change the narrative, we change the education, we take responsibility of our mental health and say, actually, no, yeah. And we make it safe for people to say that it's okay, that you're not okay. Yeah, I think, and the more we keep doing this, I think the easier it will get for people. It's really important.
Well, as celebrate our similarities, we were talking about this. That I mean, I think COVID has happened since then, but we were originally talking about mental health, and we made an error. Somebody said mental wealth, and then we thought about it. Actually, yeah, that is what we're saying. That you need young people to build their resilience, which is what the that project that Imran is doing is all about, is actually creating children's resilience or developing children's resilience and building that muscle, mental health muscle, which is the wealth that they can develop over the years, so that when they do encounter, and they will encounter difficulties, that they are resilient enough to be able to.
They've got the skills, they've got the resources, the coping skills needed, and this is what we do in schools, because obviously I work in a school as well, is develop resilience. Really, really important. And if we look at how the lockdown and we had so many rules in education in terms of separating children into groups and bubbles, and telling children that had friends in the other group that you can't mix with them, can't play with them, you can't shake hands with them, don't go near them. We went from that to integrating again, and how quickly our children have been able to manage that and be able to play together with each other again. That demonstrates resilience. And I'm not saying that's for everybody, but in the majority of children, younger children, because younger children tend to, they are like a sponge. Is when we start getting older, and this is what I mean about young people that age. Those years are really important. Those teenage years are absolutely vital. That we maybe have more intervention at that point.
All the conversations are going in that direction at the moment, aren't they? I mean, there was two things I was going to say. Well, one was just that other discussion that we had in all of our peace educations that we've been doing this last week. All the people are saying that we need to do this within schools. And I mean, we're hoping that with the DMU and the discussion that we're starting to have with the people that created the peace education to look at the pilot that they're doing and bringing that to Leicester. I'd love for that to start happening. And we would need so many people like yourself, Rehana, to get involved, because I think it requires experts of, who have experience of dealing with young people. I can't hand on heart say that I've dealt with young people.
Can this not be also, Kamla, like you're saying, like now for the school, can it not be a part of that social prescribing as well? That can be formally then
hope so.
To the
I
school.
sincerely hope so. In fact, I'm quite excited about that area, because I'm glad you raised that subject, because we've COS has just signed up, and I'm going to represent COS as the community ambassador for social prescribing for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland.
Congratulations.
The first one. Thank you very much. So I'm really excited, because I don't want it as a name. I want to make an impact, actual impact as in benefiting the communities.
Absolutely.
And I think this is a perfect time for it.
I think it is a perfect time, because social prescribing has been, something that has been put into place for quite some time now, quite a few years. Unfortunately, it hasn't been utilized, and GPs haven't been using it. And at the most, we've got as far as things like gyms and things, but it's about thinking wide out of the box. And it may be that where in your role, you're able to give a bit more weight to it, and also examples, because sometimes it's maybe getting GPs in a room is very difficult. They're very busy people, but because they are doing some of that prescribing, I know they're not the only practitioners, but to get them to think, okay, what do we mean by this? It's not just about nature therapy, and it's not just about exercise. There are many ways. Education is a big part of it.
It's a systems approach, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, that was the other point I was going to raise, that tomorrow, I've just heard that there is, in fact, I should somehow put it on the chat, maybe. So there's the results of a report done on COVID in Leicester, the impact of COVID. They're having a webinar on that tomorrow. I think it's 2 o'clock. I'll have to find it, but it's worth joining for
Yeah, sounds very
yeah,
interesting.
that involvement. And the other thing I was going to mention was that, recently, COS got involved in with the South Asian Health Action Kirit Mysteries
Yes.
organization, and he's been really proactive in setting up a community ambassadors training program. So we had Professor Nandini Chakrabarti, who is a member and a qualified psychiatrist and working psychiatrist, who has the uh, training or the qualification to deliver World Health Organization mental health training for
Yes,
community
good.
members. So
Brilliant.
we've got a group. In fact, I think that's a good prototype to
Mm,
actually expand out so that we are, as communities, we are able to assist as much as we can because of this pandemic.
yeah,
Because of the COVID, there's going to be a mental health pandemic. And if we can alleviate some of those issues turning
absolutely.
into bigger problems, I think that would be a good thing.
Yeah, and I think parcel of mental health awareness is having the preventative side. Really, really important. So before people get into a crisis point, people's mental health deteriorates further. There is intervention and prevention. These are really important so that people are able to maintain their mental well-being. I think it's really important. So yeah, it's good.
Mm,
Uh,
I mean,
mm,
that's one of the thing again. I wanted to ask you is that you have been doing lots of different kinds of engagement
yes.
thing with the community, and many of them are. And I know that you do art yourself as well, and hopefully we will get you in one of the sessions where you're going to teach us how to do that kind of thing that we're talking about. But my really my question was that how I mean, what do you think is the next form? Like, because art has got a very deeper impact
Yes.
on a person
Yes.
because of both the wrist movement and neurons and all of it. Do you see this as a more kind of parallel therapeutic kind of arts thing, or that is actually something that you're talking about? Like there is a more early intervention. Can we not
Yeah. Yeah.
use art as an early intervention, and that can,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I would agree with you there, Indrani. I think very much the early intervention. I mean, look, our children are already introduced to the arts, if we think about it, not only in schools, but in our homes, our festivals, our, celebrations, and even our everyday life. So even if we took it back, right back, if we think about play, where past generations, were experiencing poverty, some still are in our motherlands, I'm going to call them. And if we think about what did they use as entertainment, as getting by, when they couldn't do anything else, it might have been to draw in the sand. It might have been a little bit of color and drawing on your doorstep. Those kind of things. If we think about or mum weaving or whatever it was, whether that was to make a bit of money or to stitch her clothes, you know we are creative people. We are resourceful people. We use things to do things. I remember I went to India about I went to India in 2003, and I was sitting at the front of my dad's doorstep, and I was watching these women in one of the opposite homes, and I was wondering what they were doing. And it was, the netting you get for clementines and satsumas. They were
mm,
making those. They were making those. I was thinking, blimey, wow, look at that. And I'm thinking, where will that go? How far is that going to travel? And they would have got literally nothing for that, but they work so hard with their hands. So I know we understand art often as a way of survival. If I'm talking about South Asian communities in the past, so to make a living and to sustain ourselves. But we forget that we use it for enjoyment as well, and we still use it for enjoyment, and it's okay. Yeah, it's
because we
henna.
need it.
Yeah, we need it. It's to sustain us. It's to keep us well. It's to keep us happy, and it doesn't have to cost a lot.
yeah.
It doesn't have to cost a lot, and that's the wonderful thing about it. So I think to educate people that art has many benefits and it's good for your mental well-being, I think it's great, because then they'll say, well, we already have this. Oh, It's a bit like exercise. Often people link it to physical activity, but will not necessarily make the links to our mental health. So when we educate people, or we just kind of point them in the right direction, or have these conversations. Oh, I never thought that. Actually, that is right. It does. They don't need to know the science around it and the chemicals that are released, etc. But just knowing that these are the benefits, I think it will motivate people more. That actually, I'm feeling this anxious feeling. I'm not feeling great. So just like when I was, needing to go for a walk because I had cramps in my legs. That's not me. I'm giving the example. It's to say that, okay, actually, I can do this. What can I do when I'm feeling so anxious like this right now? There's nobody here. I've got no one to call. I've got nothing. What can I do? I can take myself out of this situation and take a little breather and come back. Yeah. So those kind of things. I mean, I tell this to my students when they're going for interviews. I say, arrive early, go around the block and take a walk before you go inside, just to calm you down before you go in. So there are so many things. I think it's just being creative about what we have.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about this different creative pathways, I don't think that there is a specific. Also, that's one thing, isn't it?
No.
There is no specific kind of like you have to follow this, you have to follow that.
No.
It's not there. But I think that it's more kind of you're giving yourself the freedom to explore with colors, with pencils, with this and that. That matters the most, basically.
That's right. And our recent art project that we just I managed to get to Leicester local artists to come and facilitate a 6-week course. The first comment was, from most of the participants, I'm not any good at art. I'm not any good at art. I'm not creative. Very dismissive. And then by the end of it, so surprised with themselves, but also how they perceived art, and that it's an individual thing and it's an individual interpretation. And I think that really helped them kind of have that realization. It built confidence, self-esteem, and obviously it was good for their mental well-being.
I actually joined one of Manavotsav's art lessons just yesterday or the day before. Let me go and grab my piece of art, which really shocked me. Really shocked me.
It's wonderful. It's actually, it's basically what we are trying to do is experiment with neurographic art. And it's very much to kind of say that, your thoughts, whatever negative thoughts you have, you write down the other side, and then on the other side, you kind of do that art. And it's a very, very, it's a very new form of art, but it has been very popular because, and if you practice it, you will know why.
Okay.
But I think that it has got a very good impact on people who just think that they can't do anything, like particularly drawing.
Kamla, what is it? Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness. Kamla, that is beautiful.
We just started off with little lines. We were asked to do lines.
That could be Causa's new logo.
I know.
I'm not sure about that.
Beautiful, isn't it?
I just feel like there's like a parrot.
How did you do that? That's amazing.
We're doing a workshop as well on Wednesday at the community center of this art.
If I'm not busy, I'll come along.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
Please do. It was amazing. I mean, I just found the kids' really old case of pencils just in the nick of time, and I'm dropping them here. And then I was just sat there after the thing finished, and I just continued for about an hour.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. And can I ask, how did you feel?
I felt really good. I didn't want to stop, actually.
Would you say this is one of the times that you actually were able to stop and be in the present?
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I mean, this is why I feel so passionately about peace education, because I've on and off practiced peace education for 40 years. So for me to switch off, because when the lady said to do this, that, and the other, I could do it and just switch off like autopilot. And I mentioned that to her, that I felt like I was an autopilot. And she said, that's where you need to go. And I thought, yeah, I can actually feel it. I can feel it. And
it's really good.
It's very therapeutic, definitely very therapeutic.
Yeah, we're trying to look into geometry, because geometrical shapes have got a perception cognition impact.
Yes.
And so what we're trying to see is that your wrist movement, then connecting to your neurons, your nerve cells, and how they respond to then what you feel. So
Wow.
if you want to escape from the moment, you can actually escape
Yeah.
by actually drawing these geometric shapes.
Because of the repetition.
That's
and
right,
the
repetition.
symmetry.
Yes.
And
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're trying to focus very much around the developmental psychology and and cognitive psychology combining together, which is your area, of course.
It's
But
really
no,
good.
this is wonderful. You see, I mean, we've covered 1 hour already. We can go on, really. I think
Easy.
the exciting part of these kind of collaborations is that we have got so much of a thing that we can put together, build into little courses, empower the local communities to do things on their own.
Yeah.
That can be led by organizations like Jamila's Legacy, like Cause, and that's where we kind of and if there is a scope for our students to go in and explore and see
Yes.
that
Yeah.
this is actually a real life impact. You're changing people's lives, you're contributing
Perceptions,
their
yeah.
perceptions and this and
You're
that.
opening their mind to different
That's
things.
right.
Yeah.
So and then students who are not feeling maybe very much up to it, or there are some problems that they are facing, these kind of things, particularly when you're talking to other people, it's very therapeutic again
Yeah.
to
Absolutely.
go and see it, isn't it? So oh, wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was just wanting to raise this issue that we raised with the other one, is to say that as part of our sort of ambition, Celebrate Our Similarities, we want to deliver an event in September during the time when the De Montfort University is hosting the British Science Festival, and we want collaborations. So if you're interested, we should work together. So our ambition is that we might. So this is only very early stages, but we might use the Morningside Arena, which we have been suggested that we might be able to use with the De Montfort Uni and others, and look at two key issues, like personal peace, which is what you're talking about, mental health and all of those things, personal peace as opposed to political, which I don't think we can ever solve anyway. But
We can
and
do our own corner, Kamala.
Yes.
We do
Exactly.
our own little corner. It's
Personal
the difference we can make, the little difference, and it's the
Exactly.
collectiveness of all those little differences that creates
That's
that larger
right.
piece.
That's it. And if we deal with ourselves first, then there's a chance we can deal.
Yeah.
And climate change. So
Yeah.
we want to, because the with the De Montfort Uni being the international hub for the UN on peace, justice, and strong institutions, I think we're uniquely positioned for it. And with the net zero ambitions, and I think young people deserve for us to be doing something, to be
Definitely.
honest, because there's so much anxiety about climate at the moment, for all, but young people in particular, because they're going to face they're
Consequences.
going to have to find the solutions.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely.
So keep the sort of around 17th of September in your mind.
Okay. Thank you.
And then keep all your fingers crossed.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you, Indrani, for inviting us.
Thank you very much for hosting this, and and three of us did actually have a very nice conversation. I think we'll keep it going now, working on things.
Yeah. Thank you, Kamala, and thank you, Indrani, for inviting me.
Thank you, Rehana. You're
part of it,
on
and
the show. Amazing. It's
we'll
really
work
great
together.
talking to you.
Lovely talking to you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.